Cool. All right. Well, good to see everyone. Just gonna pull up how many folks are here. Looks like we got a couple people. We'll go ahead and kick this off. Thanks everyone for joining. As you know, this is just kind of an Ask Me Anything for dual degree programs. We have myself and Karla here to chat with you guys. I'm actually going to pass it over to her. She can kick us off with an introduction, and then I'll introduce myself. And really, we're just kind of hoping this is a more of a discussion, not us talking at you. Want to hear your questions, and hopefully we can be a big help. So I'll give it over to Karla.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Nice to be in conversation today. So just really quickly about me, I went to Chicago Booth to get my MBA, and I also got my Master in Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Before going off to grad school for 3 years, I worked in consulting in New York. After grad school, I did a stint in investment banking for 2 years, and I now work in impact investing at Candide Group. And I think for me, I'm really, really happy with doing both my MBA and my MPP and happy to share any insights today. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Karla. So nice to meet everyone. As I already mentioned, my name is Matt. I actually did the MIT LGO program. So you'll see it would say joint degree with the business school at Sloan, and then a master's in engineering, which I obviously chose to be mechanical engineering. This is a little outdated. I actually left BCG today, so I am now at SpaceX. So putting that dual degree to work with my mechanical engineering background. So again, excited to chat with you guys about this. Loved my time, pursuing a technical degree alongside business, and obviously it's not your normal application process. So excited to kind of share what I've learned and hopefully answer some questions. And we'll just start there, and I'll pause and kind of just raise your hand or just come off mute, and we'll start answering some questions. And also feel free to ask questions in the chat. Okay, here we go. Joshua.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. My question's around timing for doing the joint degrees. For example, applying in the normal cycle, or like as a first year student, for example, right? I guess does applying as a first year student have like a certain benefit? Like what are the pros and cons, the trade-offs like between the different timelines?
I might pass that one to Karla because LGOs is the same application.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I will say, MBA and then the Master in Public Policy. So for most of the top schools, it can be quite flexible. So for example, looking at Harvard Kennedy, if you start at Harvard Kennedy, you can then apply to one of the partner schools other than HBS your first year, and vice versa. If you start anywhere else other than HBS, whether it's Wharton or Tuck, or what's it called, or MIT Sloan, you can apply to Kennedy while there. This is anecdotal, but honestly, what I have found is that I think people have greater success applying to MBAs once they're in public policy school. So, for example, there were a few people in my section at Kennedy who either got waitlisted at MBA programs or who decided to apply once in school. And I found that overall the process was a lot smoother and easier for them. And I think the reason why is a few things. One, if you're already in a grad school program, you're kind of a known quantity at that point, right? Like you've already gotten one school's seal of approval. And then the other thing is if you do really well your first semester in grad school, those grades will be taken into consideration once you apply for whatever other program. So it really varies though and depends. For me, I actually applied to both at the same time. And I got accepted to both MBA programs and MPPs. And whereas most people start at the Kennedy School or start their public policy degree first, I actually, for a number of reasons, decided to start on the MBA side. So it's a little bit about that.
Got it. Yeah, so I'm specifically interested in the MPP and MBA program for Harvard. I have a political science background for school, and I worked in tech, was a founder for a little bit, and now I'm trying to focus more on like sustainability and consumer and all that, and how, eventually after business, like politics is kind of like the next arena where you could really make change. And I was wondering, just how far out do you need to have your like vision planned, and like, do schools like really care if you tackle like more of like a policy angle first or a business angle first? Because I guess I'm trying to think of AdCom's perspective of like, okay, how do we like make sure we have a successful student go through a program, and like how do our numbers look in terms of like job placement and salary and all that?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say for Harvard, just, to be very, very clear, they are completely separate processes, right? So even if you check the box and say, okay, hey, business school, I'm also applying to the public policy side and vice versa, the admissions decisions don't happen I guess together. You have to get into both programs, and then basically you'll be considered for the joint, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I think it's just a matter of like crafting a story that makes sense for the respective program. Now, certainly on the public policy side, there's, a bunch of people who start off in the for-profit sector and continue to be for-profit sector oriented, but they show some sort of interest in the public good. But I would just keep in mind the audience of whatever school it is that you're applying to.
Right. So there's no like joint review kind of process. Got it.
Other than looking at the joint degree essay, but again, that happens independently at both schools.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Gonna come off mute and answer Andrew's question. How did you decide that a joint program was right for you? Carla, I'll be interested your take on this too. I think for me, I came from a technical background, engineering undergrad, served in the Navy on a submarine, so like nuclear engineering, mechanical engineering, a lot of that work. I loved it, but like wanted to get into the business side, so I wanted to merge those two things. Like that was just kind of like my initial like, let's see what's out there. Um, so I think like all that to say, like, what are your goals and what do you enjoy? Like, if you enjoy being hands-on, right? Like, then maybe a joint engineering works for you, or maybe like, there's JD MBA programs out there. I can't speak to them, but like, if you're super into law or like reading, like maybe that's what you're into. I think the other thing that's important here too is like, not every dual degree program is created equal. For example, the LGO program, I think, has a very different value proposition than Harvard's engineering and MBA joint degree as well, right? Like, so I think part of it is not just is a joint program right for you, but like, is the specific program that you're applying to right for you, right? Because to be transparent, LGO was the only dual degree program I applied to, right? Michigan Ross has one, Harvard has one. I didn't apply to those just because I didn't feel like they were as strong of a fit, right? So I think step one is, are you interested in a second degree? And then step two is, which programs are you actually interested in, right? So you're not just like applying to a bunch of different ones that might not be a fit. Carly, I don't know, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say I think that's spot on, Matt. I would say I think for me, honestly, like pretty much applying after or directly after undergrad, I knew I wanted to get a joint degree program, and I think that was reflective in my undergrad studies. Like in undergrad, I studied international relations and I studied econ, right? So when you look at an MBA and an MPP, those are very like similar paths. I think for me, I had only ever worked in the private sector in consulting before school, but I knew I always had this itch about, like social impact questions and just like the broader social good. And I trusted my gut with that. I will say I got a ton of pushback when I started floating the idea that I might want to do a second degree, especially on the business school side. Like people are like, oh, an MPP is like, it's a luxury degree. Already recruited for banking and you like did so well, you placed so well, like you already got a return offer, like you don't need to go and get this other degree. And although I didn't need to, I think looking back on it now, my education would have felt incomplete had I not, because I think the programs I chose were so different and complementary. So I always describe it as like Chicago Booth allowed me to exercise like the brain, where it's very analytical, it's very quantitative. I got to pick exactly the classes I wanted to take. And it was, super quant heavy in nature, and that was like well and good. And on the Kennedy School side, I always say that, that's where I got to exercise the heart. So that's where I got to learn about things that keep me up at night, like gender equity and racial inequality, and climate change, right? And at Kennedy, I had a cohort, whereas at Booth, I didn't. And so they were such different programs, but the way that they came together for me was really nice, and that they were extremely complementary and it didn't feel redundant. So I guess recruitment, Matt, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like this is top of mind given your very recent job search.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at this. Again, like I'll caveat this with I just have experience with LGO, right? But I think with dual degree programs, and let's just say LGO for example, right? Like you are at least for LGO, you're required to do a technical internship because you have to write an engineering thesis. So you're actually quite limited on your internship, right? Like while all of my Sloan classmates were in like interviewed with BCG, McKinsey, product roles, whatever it might be, like I was basically I had to choose from a list of partner companies to intern with, and I went to Nashville and like built SUVs for Nissan in the middle of COVID, right? Like not your typical business school internship where everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I was working on Wall Street or whatever," right? Um, so I think whether that hurts or helps, like I don't know if I can answer that. Like I don't think LGO helped me get my full time job with BCG, right? Like BCG hires MBA interns and then plans to give them return offers, and then like that's their numbers, right? Like sometimes there are full-time hiring slots, sometimes there are not. Like for my year, there were slots. I applied and was able to go. Um, so I don't know if it makes it harder or easier. I just think it's different, right? Like there's a very specific set of companies that are looking for LGOs or dual degree candidates, right? Like it's the heavy ops companies, think major defense primes, automotive, autonomous vehicles, whatever it might be, right? Like that's a very niche market. So if I wanted to go into that, I feel like I would have had more opportunities. But the fact that I went to a traditional Sloan full-time job, I think it actually was a little harder. That being said, I do think that the degree program, regardless of what it does to your first job, I think your second job and your third job, I think that's where these dual degree programs like pay off like crazy, right? I would not have gotten my foot in the door at SpaceX if I didn't have a master's in engineering from MIT, right? Like I think point blank. So I do think if you have the long-term view in mind, then the degree programs can really open some serious doors.
Yeah, and I honestly I couldn't agree more. So going back to this theme of like, I mean, so I just for full transparency, I did early investment banking recruiting even before I started grad school, so I did it like the summer before entering school, and I already had an offer in hand when I walked in. Like I knew I was going to JP Morgan, all that was well and good. I did my first internship, and thankfully, like when I told them, I was like, "Hey, listen, I want to do this other program, but like I really am serious about coming back. Is there any way I can just like come back and intern again?" And they were super accommodating about it. And I will say, if anything, like I think it was really, really well received because, for a lot of investment bankers, like that's been like their whole world, right? You move up the ranks. And so, a lot of people at the firm were really interested in like, okay, even from like a geopolitics perspective, like how do you think differently than perhaps like we might think? So I think tangentially it was helpful, but I will say now that I've transitioned over to impact investing, to Matt's point, like that's where it helped so much because if you just looked at my resume, before I took this role, you would be like a private sector applicant, like consulting investment banking, like, do you actually care about impact? And for me, having like the public policy degree, like I didn't need to do any explaining. It was like, oh, if anything, like, of course you want to work at the intersection of like of financial analysis and of social impact work. Like this, it was just such a natural fit. So I will say like the dividends to Matt's point after like roll two, roll three out of school are just like so exponential that's where it really comes into play.
Let's hear from Alan. I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, I'm Alan. Nice to meet you all. I have a question more like for I'd say direct at Carla because I'm currently a boost student at Chicago too. I just want to ask about like for like investment banking technology recruiting, what sort of like what are the sort of the skills that are sort of needed? Because like I do have a background in computer science, but I'm not sure if like um that is like useful for like investment banking and like will I ever have to like read through the code base or is it more on like the financial aspects? Because like I'm not sure like how do you evaluate a software company that's like doesn't really have real assets, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid question, but I will say like I think this is, this is where it gets muddy between like technology practitioners and people who are very finance focused. So I will say no, like you will never look at the code. It's all very focused on like looking at the market positioning of the company, whatever metrics you do have for it. And usually in investment banking, if you're at a big firm like a JP Morgan, the companies are mature enough to where you do have, very mature financial metrics that you're considering. So yeah, you'll never have to go into the code. It's just a matter of like reading a lot of like financial analysis reports and then also looking at market landscaping and looking at their kind of competitive positioning. I will say, I think, being like having a computer science background or having like a more technical background I think tells a good story in that, hey, like I am interested in tech coverage, for example, because, I used to be a technology practitioner. Like that's a very straightforward, a straightforward reason for why you want to cover a certain area. But certainly not, those technical skills are not a prerequisite.
Gotcha. So is there like a focus for the tech? Is it like more, did you focus on like software technology or more like hard tech, like deep tech, sort of like, like semiconductors, that kind of stuff?
It varied. So we did everything software, hardware. Yeah, we did everything. And sorry, I want to be mindful that this conversation's about the joint degree program.
Yeah,
So
I totally understand.
yeah, Alan, if you just want to ping me in the chat, I can follow up there.
Sure.
Um, Joshua, I think you had something else.
Yeah, I had another question about your experience as a student. Like both of you guys actually just, I understand a lot of the MBA program, a big part of the experience is socializing with your classmates, talking to alumni and all that stuff. So with a joint degree, the academics obviously is a much bigger commitment. Just wondering how you guys balance that as a student. how you thought about prioritizing and divvying up your time there. Any tips and tricks?
I can take a first stab at this. I think the first answer is like it's hard, right? Like I think at LGO, I think there's a I think people tend to just like stick with other LGOs. Like it's like a small class, right? It's like 40, 45, I don't even remember. Um, which is one way to do it, right? Because everyone's busy, everyone's doing the engineering class, like everyone's doing Sloan. I took a different approach. Like I'm very close with my LGO classmates, but I made like a dedicated effort to really embed with the Sloan like MBA program. But it did take like it took extra effort, right? Because like you might have engineering class when the rest of the Sloanies are off, or like you have an engineering assignment due the next day, and all the other Sloanies are at the bars, right? Like I think it just takes a dedicated effort, but like I think it's obviously worth it. To try to embed yourself like with both programs as much as you can. Like it's right. Like I don't know. I look at it two ways, right? Like a smaller network is obviously great because it's stronger, but then you also like want a wide net as well, right? Which is why you want to kind of embed yourself with the business school people as well. Um, but I mean, there's no doubt, like it's hard, right? Like even normal, just business school students, like everyone says the hardest thing about business school is like saying no to things, right? Like you're just so busy. So like everything wants your attention, right? It's like people going out, homework assignments, like maybe you have a family at home, like there's just so much. So I just think it makes it that much harder to say no to things. And like the FOMO is real. So you have to like come into business school and joint degree program with what are your priorities, right? And then stick to those priorities and try to navigate those 2 or 3 years accordingly. Carla, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, yes, there's trade-offs to everything, right? But I actually really loved the way that my experience worked out because I feel like even after my first year at Chicago, like I had really, really deep relationships with people, and I didn't feel like me going off to, to Kennedy in any way hampered. Developing those. Now, obviously, it was like I wasn't on campus second year, and also COVID happened during my second year, right? So it's not like people were able to like hang out all year, anyways. But I think for me, I really appreciated like the different audiences and that, in business school, you go to school with like the marketers and the operations people and like the finance folks, but in public policy, you have like the activists who like chain themselves to things, and you have like the diplomats, and you have, like the national security people, and you also have like a sprinkle of business people. So Kennedy is just like such a broader survey of practitioners. And, I think for me today, like I have really great friends from both schools. And yeah, I'm sure I sacrificed, some depth, but I'm really, really happy with the breadth that I got.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. Curious as a follow-up, is there anything you guys wish you were better prepared for going into the joint degree programs? Like wish you could, I don't know, maybe take another stab at?
The school part was just a lot for both, especially for Booth. Business school at Booth, at least, not a vacation. I don't know, Matt.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to this. I mean, one thing I'm glad I did, I already mentioned it. Like I felt like I kind of did some self-reflecting before going, and we're like, these are the three things I care about most, which is like learning, right? I came to the military, so I was like, I knew what profit was. That was about it, right? So I was like, I want to learn. Two, I had like a new fiance at the time, so I was like, I want to spend time with her, right? Like that was very important to me, right? And so I felt like establishing that really helped me navigate what was important over those 2 years. So again, maybe it doesn't directly answer the question, but it's something I'm glad I did and I would recommend doing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yep. We have about 3 more minutes technically, I think. Any saved rounds?
I do have a hard stop, so sorry.
And obviously I can put this up on the screen. Links, QR codes to both of our profiles. So we're obviously always happy to chat. Okay, we have a hand raised.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for your presentation and for being here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah, I was just wondering, for the joint degree, like, um, I guess my like question is, do you think it would be like advisable for someone who like doesn't have a business background? Like for instance, like I was interested in like the JD MBA degree, but I was like, is it gonna be too much work? I don't have kind of expertise in neither of those. Like I'm from like a STEM undergrad. So I was just wondering if you can, yeah, like speak to that a little bit. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, from my perspective, like, I don't know of any or very few programs that have like an undergrad law, designation. I think I've heard like fashion majors go to law school, like Elwoods, and English majors too. So that certainly I don't think would be a disqualifier on the law school side. And then on the business school side, like, yes, it is, it's a more concentrated set of people, but they're still looking for diversity in the class, especially when it comes to like professional experience and academic background. And certainly have seen many STEM majors do really, really well in MBA programs and in law programs too.
Awesome, thank you.
Maybe with our last minute, Karla, do you want to finish off with your top tip for dual degree program applications? And I'll go, and then we'll finish it up.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like tell the story only you can tell. People always write to what they think the admissions committee wants to hear, but authenticity is like very, very short order in this world. And so I would just try to speak in your unique voice.
That's great. Mine would be similar. I mean, focus on the story, right? You have a very important set of. If I had a whiteboard, I would draw it, right? Like there's this dot over here, which is you today, right? You have all these experiences and skills and things right? But then there's like you in 10 years, right? You want to tell the story that puts the dot in the middle of those two that says like LGO or like, dual degree at Harvard and the Kennedy School, right? Like, or HBS and the Kennedy School, like connect those lines, right? And show them why you need a dual degree and why you need it at that school, right? Like you want to show them that you've thought about it and it's all, all according to your plan. So that's my lasting wisdom. But appreciate everyone joining. I'm sorry it's so short, but again, we're both available. Always happy to chat dual degrees. I'm a big nerd on the inside, so love talking about engineering, all that stuff. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you so
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.